Have you ever sat across from someone you love and realized you no longer have the words to reach them? That was me in a small kitchen in Denmark. 2 cups of coffee, and a silence louder than any argument. It wasn't that we stopped loving each other. We just stopped understanding. This is the story of how English, the very thing that once divided us, became the bridge that saved our marriage. A quiet kitchen in Denmark. It was one of those Danish mornings, gray, cold, and painfully quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't soothe your mind, but presses down on your chest like heavy snow. I was sitting in our small kitchen, staring at the steam curling up from my coffee. Across the table sat my husband, eyes fixed on his phone, pretending to read the news. We didn't fight that morning. We didn't talk either. That was somehow worse. I remember thinking, how did we get here? We used to talk about everything, dreams, travel, even silly things like what kind of dog we'd get one day. But now every word felt like walking through fog. Every sentence came out broken, mistranslated, tired. English was our only common language. He didn't speak my native tongue, and my Danish was too poor to explain my heart. So we both sat there, trapped in silence, 2 people in love, slowly losing connection in a language that was supposed to unite us. The toast popped up from the toaster. He buttered his slice without looking at me. The sound of the knife against the plate felt almost deafening. It's strange. When you live in a foreign country, loneliness doesn't come from being alone. It comes from not being understood. You can hear people everywhere, on buses, in shops, in parks, but none of those voices seem to touch you. They just float past like waves you can't swim through. That morning I felt like giving up. Not just on the conversation, not just on English, but on the entire effort of trying to make things work, with him, with this country, with myself. I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe we've reached the end. But somewhere deep down, another voice whispered, a tiny stubborn voice that said, stay. Stay in the silence. Stay in the effort. Stay even when it's hard. Because maybe, just maybe, this quiet kitchen isn't the end. Maybe it's the beginning of learning how to speak again. Not just in English, but from the heart. That's how my journey began. Not in a classroom, not with a grammar book, but in that small kitchen in Denmark, where love and language both felt broken, and yet that's where I learned. Sometimes silence isn't the absence of words. It's the space where healing begins. When words became walls. It's funny how words can save you one day and hurt you the next. When I first moved to Denmark, English was my lifeline. It was the only way I could order food, ask for directions, or make a friend. Every sentence felt like a small victory. But somewhere along the way, that same language started to feel like a trap. I remember one evening vividly. My husband and I were walking home after dinner with friends. Everyone spoke Danish, fast, fluent, effortless. I smiled, nodded, pretending to understand. But my brain was spinning like an overworked machine, translating every sound into fragments. By the time I caught up, the conversation had already moved on. I felt like a ghost at my own table. When we got home, he asked gently, "Are you okay?" And I snapped, not because I was angry, but because I was tired. Tired of always being the one who didn't get the joke. Tired of using a language that made me sound like a child. tired of feeling small in every conversation. My voice cracked as I said, "I just can't keep doing this." He went silent. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know what to say. That was when English, our bridge, started turning into a wall. Every mispronounced word became an argument. Every pause became a misunderstanding. Every never mind became a little piece of distance between us. Psychologists say that language is more than words. It's identity. When you can't express yourself, your sense of you begins to fade. And that's what was happening to me. I wasn't just losing confidence in English. I was losing confidence in myself. At night, I'd lie awake thinking about how unfair it was, how something as small as a word, sorry, wait, enough, could hold so much power over two people who once understood each other without speaking. But here's the strange truth I'd later learn. It's not the words that build walls. It's the fear behind them. The fear of saying something wrong. The fear of sounding foolish. The fear of not being enough. And the more afraid I became, the quieter I got. Until one day silence wasn't just between us, it was us. That was when I realized, if I didn't learn how to rebuild with words, I'd lose more than my English. I'd lose my marriage. The day I decided to speak again. It happened on an ordinary Sunday, the kind that looks calm on the outside but feels like a storm inside. He was sitting on the sofa, scrolling through his phone. I was in the kitchen washing dishes that were already clean. We hadn't argued that day, but the silence between us was sharp, like glass you could almost hear breaking. Then out of nowhere I whispered to myself, "This can't be how it ends." My own voice startled me. It sounded small but determined, like the first crack of light through a heavy cloud. I dried my hands, walked into the living room, and stood in front of him. He looked up, confused. I took a deep breath and said in shaky English, "I don't want to live like strangers anymore." My grammar was wrong, my accent thick. But for the first time in a long while, my words came from the heart, not from fear. He put his phone down. His eyes softened. And then, instead of answering right away, he said something I'll never forget. "Then talk to me. Even if it's broken, I'll listen." Something inside me cracked open. I cried, not because I was sad, but because I finally felt seen. That night we talked for hours. About small things at first: food, work, the weather. Then about deeper ones: how lonely we both felt, how love can survive in silence, but not forever. I stumbled through my words. I mixed tenses, forgot vocabulary, made hundreds of mistakes. But he didn't correct me. He just listened, patiently, quietly, as if every imperfect word mattered. And in that fragile conversation, something started to rebuild. That I realized then. Fluency doesn't mean speaking perfectly. That it means daring to speak, even when your voice trembles. That it means choosing connection over correctness. It means believing that being understood matters more than being perfect. That Sunday didn't magically fix everything. We still had many quiet mornings after that. But something shifted. I stopped waiting for confidence to appear. I started creating it, one brave sentence at a time. And the more I spoke, even brokenly, the closer we became. Because love, I learned, isn't built on perfect grammar. It's built on the courage to keep talking, even when words fall apart. When language turned into love again. Weeks passed. The air in our home felt lighter, not because everything was solved, but because we were finally trying again. That we started making small rituals out of words. Every morning, he'd teach me one new Danish phrase while I made coffee. Every evening, I'd teach him one new word in my language, words that didn't exist in English, words that carried pieces of my soul. Sometimes we laughed at each other's pronunciation, sometimes we argued, not because of the meaning, but because of the feeling behind the words. But slowly, almost silently, our broken communication became something beautiful. A mix of 3 languages, half grammar, half heart. I remember one night vividly. We were cooking together, pasta again. He pointed at the pan and said something in Danish that I didn't understand. Instead of getting frustrated, I asked him to repeat. He did, slower this time, smiling. And I realized this is what love sounds like. Not fluent, not perfect, but patient. We no longer needed perfect words to understand each other. A pause could mean I'm thinking. A sigh could mean I'm sorry. A quiet glance across the room could mean I'm here. Don't give up. That was when I finally understood something profound. Language is not what you speak. It's what you give. Every time you choose to speak, even when afraid, you give someone a piece of yourself, your effort, your vulnerability, your truth. And when love meets that effort halfway, it becomes bilingual in its own way. A language of empathy, patience, and quiet understanding. That I started speaking to everyone again, shopkeepers, neighbors, colleagues. My sentences were still imperfect, but I no longer apologize for them. I was done being afraid, because confidence doesn't come from knowing every word. It comes from believing you have the right to use your voice. And one evening, as I was locking up the cafe where I worked, a Danish woman smiled and said, "Your Danish is getting really good." I smiled back and said softly, "So is my courage." That night, walking home through the cool Copenhagen air, I realized something simple but life-changing. Language had stopped being my wall. It had become my bridge. The one that led me back to connection, back to understanding, and most of all back to love. The Danish Counselor. It was a rainy Thursday when I finally decided to visit the local communal counselor, a Danish community advisor who helped foreigners adapt to life here. Her office smelled faintly of coffee and wet coats. She greeted me with a calm smile that felt both distant and kind, the kind of smile people in Denmark are famous for. Her name was Anna, and she spoke English slowly, gently, like someone unwrapping a fragile gift. "So," she said, "tell me what's been difficult?" I wanted to say everything. The silence at home, the fear of speaking, the exhaustion of pretending to understand. But all I managed to whisper was, "I feel invisible." Anna nodded, scribbling something on her notepad. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You don't need to speak perfect Danish to belong here. You only need to let people see that you're trying." In Denmark, effort is a language too. Her words struck something deep inside me. For months, I had believed that communication meant perfection, that if I couldn't speak flawlessly, I had failed. But now, sitting across from this calm Danish woman, I realized that communication isn't about flawless grammar. It's about showing up. She gave me a small exercise, something that sounded simple but changed everything. Every day, she said. Say one honest sentence in Danish to someone. Not perfect, just honest. That evening I tried at the supermarket. I told the cashier, Jeg lærer stadig dansk. I'm still learning Danish. She smiled and replied, Det går nok. It'll be okay. It was such a small exchange, maybe 5 seconds, but it felt like a victory. My heart beat faster, not from fear but from pride. Over the next weeks I kept practicing one honest sentence per day. Some people corrected me. Some just smiled politely, but every time I spoke, I felt a layer of fear melt away. And at home, something else shifted too. My husband noticed the effort. He started replying to me in slower English, sometimes mixing in Danish words so we could both learn together. Language was no longer a test, it was teamwork. And I began to see that the real counselor was not just Anna but life itself. Every awkward conversation, every misunderstanding, every brave little word. They were all my teachers. If there's one thing I learned from that Danish counselor, it's this. You don't heal by waiting until you're ready. You heal by starting before you're ready, with the words you have right now. And sometimes the simplest sentence, I'm still learning, can open doors that fear kept closed for years. When fear lost its voice, there comes a strange day in every learner's life, the day when fear begins to sound. Smaller. It happened to me one quiet morning on the train to Copenhagen. The woman sitting next to me asked a question in Danish. For a split second my brain froze, the old panic rising, that same whisper. You'll say it wrong. They'll laugh. But instead of staying silent, I took a deep breath and answered. Clumsy but brave. She smiled, nodded, continued talking. And just like that, fear lost its power. That moment didn't make me fluent. It made me free. Because fear doesn't disappear when you master something, it disappears when you stop obeying it. I used to wait for courage to arrive first, like some magical energy that would make me brave enough to speak. But courage never came. What came instead was the choice to speak despite the trembling. Later that week, I read an article about how our brains literally rewire when we practice speaking another language. The author said, each mistake is like lifting a tiny dumbbell in your brain's gym. That image stuck with me. Every mispronounced word wasn't proof of stupidity, it was proof of effort. Proof that my mind was building strength, one awkward conversation at a time. At home, I shared that with my husband. He laughed. So you're basically training for a linguistic marathon? Exactly, I said, laughing back. And somehow, laughter became our new language, one we both understood perfectly, but fear still tried to visit from time to time. Like when I had to make a phone call in Danish. Or when someone spoke too fast, and I could only catch half the words. Those moments used to crush me. Now they became small experiments. How calm could I stay while not understanding? One afternoon, I ordered coffee and accidentally asked for a tall horse instead of a tall latte. The barista burst out laughing, and so did I. That's when I realized something deeper than grammar or pronunciation. Once you can laugh at your mistakes, you've already beaten fear. You see, fear thrives on perfection, but laughter starves. So I started to laugh more. My accent, my tangled sentences. How I once said, I'm pregnant instead of I'm embarrassed. Every slip became a story. not a shame, and as fear lost its voice, my real one started to grow louder, slowly, surely, beautifully. The language of patience. If there's one thing Denmark teaches you faster than grammar, it's patience. Nothing in this country moves in a rush. Not the trains, not the conversations, not even the weather. Everything takes its time, including you. At first, this frustrated me. I wanted results. I wanted fluency, confidence, and perfect pronunciation now. But language, like love, like healing, doesn't care about your deadlines. It grows in silence, in small embarrassing moments, in all the times you think you're failing but actually aren't. I started to notice something fascinating. Whenever I slowed down, really slowed down, my words came out clearer. My mind stopped panicking. My tongue stopped fighting. The problem wasn't that I didn't know enough English or Danish. The problem was that I didn't give myself permission to take it slow. Learning to speak a new language is like planting tulips in Danish soil. You can't scream at them to bloom faster. You just water them, protect them, and trust that someday they'll rise. Quietly, confidently. I remember one morning, I was practicing pronunciation with my husband. He stopped me and said, "You always rush to the end of your sentence like you're afraid I'll interrupt." He was right. I was speaking from fear, not from peace. So that day, I made a new rule. I will no longer hurry my words each time I spoke. I paused. I let silence do half the talking, and strangely, people started listening more carefully. Not because my English was better, but because I sounded present. One evening, I asked my counselor Anna why Danes seemed so comfortable with pauses. She smiled and said, "In Denmark, silence isn't awkward. It's respect. It means you're thinking." That sentence changed everything because suddenly I realized I didn't need to fill every gap with words to prove I belonged. Sometimes, understanding begins in the quiet. Now when I speak, whether in English, Danish, or the soft mix of both, I take my time. I breathe before the words. I let them land. Patience, I discovered, is not just a virtue. It's a language, one that fluency can't exist without. And when I finally stopped racing against time, I began to notice the beauty of every tiny win. Stranger understanding me, a coworker laughing at my joke, my husband saying, "I love your accent. It's your story." So if you're learning a language or learning how to live again, remember this. Don't rush your becoming. The pauses are part of the music too. The bridge we built. The night it all came full circle, the rain was soft. That kind of Danish drizzle that never really stops, just lingers. We were sitting in the same kitchen where everything had almost fallen apart. Same table. Same mugs. But the silence, it was different this time. It felt alive. My husband looked up from his tea and said, "Do you remember when we couldn't even talk?" I nodded. Now we can't stop talking. I laughed. It wasn't perfect. My accent still slipped, his patience still wavered. But we were no longer afraid of misunderstanding each other. Because we had learned the art of trying again. That's what language and love really is. Not about saying it right, but about staying long enough to find the right words together. I used to think English was just another skill, another checkbox for living abroad. But it turned out to be something deeper. A mirror that showed me who I was when stripped of fluency, pride, and certainty. It made me humble. It made me brave. Through English, I didn't just reconnect with my husband, I reconnected with myself. The girl who was terrified to speak is now reading books out loud, recording videos, helping others learn. Not because she's perfect, but because she stayed. Sometimes the bridge between two people isn't built from grand gestures or perfect grammar, but it's built from awkward pauses, patient smiles, and the courage to sound foolish while trying to. So if you're out there, listening to this, maybe sitting alone with your coffee, wondering if you'll ever be good enough, I want you to know something. Fluency isn't a destination, that it's a heartbeat, growing stronger each time you dare to speak, even when your voice trembles. Our marriage didn't survive because we found the right words. It survived because we kept speaking. Even when the words broke, even when the grammar failed, that we learned that love, like language, lives in the effort, not the outcome. Now, whenever people ask me, was it worth it? I smile and say, every word, every tear, every silence. Because somewhere between mispronounced vowels and late-night talks, between laughter and translation apps, we built something unshakable, a bridge called understanding. So if you've almost given up on love, on English, on yourself, stay a little longer. The bridge is already waiting. You just have to keep building.